This podcast contains discussions of child abuse, sexual repression and sexual abuse, suicide, racism, misogyny, PTSD and PTSD symptoms, and spiritual oppression and abuse, including guilt, shame, and fear. In most episodes, we will be mentioning some of these concepts in a general way without any graphic detail. If any of these topics or other triggering topics will be mentioned in great detail, we will let you know at the beginning of each individual episode, as well as in the show notes for that episode.
Rolling river of time, you've healed me in too many days. No regrets, no confusion, there'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Welcome back to the Leaving Eden podcast. My name is Gavri'el Hacohen, and I am here with my co-host.
Hi, I'm Sadie Carpenter.
Anything else?
No, I couldn't think of anything for this episode.
Yeah, I can't think of anything. Well, the thing is, though, that we do have a lot to say for this episode. You want to know why?
Why?
Because this episode is our 1-year podcast anniversary episode.
Well, happy podcast anniversary to you, Gabi.
Happy podcast anniversary to you. So we thought that we would go back and talk maybe about some of our favorite moments and some of the things that really stood out to us.
So this is just going to be a fun kind of retrospective episode, looking back over what we've done in the last year and what we hope to do in the next year of podcasting.
Yes, and we have a lot of plans, and we have a lot of things that we're really proud of. So if you want maybe a little sneak peek at some of the stuff that we're going to do, stay tuned. But before we get into all of that, just got to say, the Leaving Eden podcast is a podcast about Sadie Carpenter's life in and escape from the Independent Fundamental Baptist cult. We seek to educate and to inform our listeners about the dangers of this cult, other cults, fundamentalism, extreme high-pressure groups as a whole, and to promote freedom of mind, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. So if you want to support our show, what you can do is you can go to our Patreon or join the Patreon. It is patreon.com/Leaving Eden podcast. And if you like our show and you want to interact with other fans of the show, you can join our Facebook group, which is going to be facebook.com/groups/Eden Exodus. Man. So Sadie, it's been a year.
It has been a year.
How do you feel?
You know, I feel great. I feel like what we've done is a great start to telling the story that we started out to tell.
I think that we got like a lot of the main points in, but there is just so much stuff that we really still want to talk about.
There is so much, and I feel like every week I'm remembering something new that, oh, I've got to talk about this weird thing, or, oh, do you remember so-and-so, that guy was crazy, and I bet he needs his own episode. So I email, Gabi can tell you, I email from my personal email, I email with the subject title episode idea, and I'll send it to you, and I'll send it to the podcast email.
I swear she'll be like up at like 4 a.m. with a baby, and
you'll get like 3 emails that say episode idea.
I'll wake up in the morning, be like, I'm gonna start work. I'll check my email. 3 episodes from 3:42 a.m., 3:43 a.m., 3:48 a.m. episode idea. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go add these to the Google Doc.
The way I want to talk about a little bit about like the way I see this podcast.
Yeah.
So there are other shows that talk more about the doctrine of the IFB. And we have a really good amount of doctrine mixed in to the storytelling aspect of our show, because I want people to understand like the doctrines behind why people do these things that the IFB does.
One of the things that I really want to thank you for is being so good at explaining that in a way that it's easy to understand. Because
you've met my dad, right?
Yeah, I've met your dad. He's good at that too. But you know,
I think that's where I get it. Like he is a master explainer. I think that I really have that passed down from him.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't help it. You spend so much time around the guy when you're growing up and when you're learning about this stuff. But really, for me, when I'm, because I don't have any familiarity with a lot of the theological aspect, even like a lot of, like, I know the general basis for Christianity, but like, there's a lot of big theological concepts that you tell me about. And I'm like, wait, go back to that. And you'd explain it in a way that's really easy to understand. And then I'm like, okay, I got that. And then you go into something that's way more complicated and way more nuanced, and you make it so that it's understandable for regular people.
Well, I think that's one of the things I really love about our show, because I think that other ex-IFB media that is more specifically for those who have left the IFB, those who have left the IFB and stayed evangelical Christian, can gloss over some of this theology or use jargon or buzzwords that clue in. Everybody who's listening to them who came up IFB knows exactly what they're saying, but if you listen to it, you would have no idea. And I think that's why that's one reason I wanted to do our own show, because we can explain that sort of thing to people who watched the Duggars and like to snark on the Duggars, but don't really understand the theological mechanism that makes the Duggars happen.
I went back and I in preparing for this episode, because we were like, let's do an anniversary special. One of the things that I did was I went back and I looked at like some of the docs that we had put together when we were preparing for our first episode, and like when we were deciding what we wanted the show to be. And you were telling me about all of these other shows that there are, and you know what, those shows, they're great if you're like, like we said when we were recommending other episodes, they're good at what they do. We set out to do something that's different from them, and if you are ex-Fundy or ex-IFB and you still want to be like an evangelical Christian, a lot of those shows are going to feel familiar to you because, let's be real, they are run by like evangelical pastors. The hosts are pastors. So if you're used to hearing that kind of tone and that kind of delivery, then that's going to be something that's comfortable for you to listen to and that you're going to feel at home when you listen to, well, as other people are going to be like, you know what, maybe that's not for me. So that's not what we set out to do. But one of the things that I was looking at was that we set out to make a show that I felt like, I don't want to talk about this in like really in like marketing terms, I guess, because that makes us feel some people might think that's a bit cynical. You know what I'm saying? But like what we were talking about was, we're like, we could have a show that actually has like crossover appeal. So where you have this experience and I have to, especially at the beginning, I had to try to be an avatar for the audience, to try and be like, wait, go back to that. Like, or, my reaction to something.
Well, because when we started, I would just like blow through some terminology and you would be like, wait,
go back to
what?
That. Yeah. Yeah, and now we know, for our writing process, we know, okay, if you say something like that, then we have to go back, explain that to people who might not know.
Well, that's been valuable for me because now I have so much better of an idea of what I can say, and the normal person, like by normal, I mean, was never in the IFB. It's a compliment. The average person I know that I can say some things and the average person will be able to follow. And I know that there are other things that I can say that the average person will miss. And it's given me so much better barometer for what that is.
Well, one of the things that they say is that how do you know that you're an expert on something is when you can teach it to somebody else, right?
Yeah, and well, what am I an expert on more than my own life?
Right. And also like this theology, this religious stuff. And I'm sure that you were an expert before, but this is really, sharpened that knife.
Yeah, and I have a couple of thoughts on that. A key part of deconstruction for me and getting out of the IFB and kind of figuring myself out, a big part of that for me was picking apart these beliefs and picking apart these rules and understanding truly where they come from. It's just the way my brain works. I need to understand something fully for it to make sense. And I will go to extreme lengths to look up all of the information about something and get as much information as I can crammed into my head. It's just the way that my brain happens to work. So when I was coming out of the IFB, I did a lot of this research. I spent weeks. So the the Jack Hyles 2 Battle of 1989 episode that we did really early on last year, that research is all things that I dug deep into and spent weeks researching when I was first coming out of the IFB. And when it was time for us to do that episode, I knew what websites to look for because I could remember little fragments of that research that I had done. And I would know, oh, well, if I go to this website and I use these search terms, I bet I'll turn up that one article that was really impactful for me the first time I learned about this.
Well, it's just a sort of same thing where you would be like, I need to have the one thing that I can point to, like the door, where I know that he's lying, where I can point to that and I can be like, I know that this is true, or I know that this is false unequivocally.
Yeah, my brain works on information. I'd always rather have too much information than too little. So a lot of when I was deconstructing, a lot of it for me was picking apart the theologies and picking apart the history and the rules and trying to gain an understanding of how they all work together. And that's what I wanted to do with this show, because what I originally thought of doing when I came out of the IFB was writing a memoir. That was my first thought when I had really started to recover and be okay, get my mental health in order, get my physical health in order. A few years ago, I was really starting to feel okay again. The next step for me was, well, I want to speak out about this. And I feel like I am uniquely positioned to tell the story of the IFB from my perspective, because my parents were there for the poison sermon, because I was literally born into the membership of First Baptist Church of Hammond when Jack Hyles was the pastor, because I was there at Hyles-Anderson College when Jack Scott went to jail. I felt like I had a perspective that was worth telling my story from. But there are so many other good memoirs from people who have been raised in very similar situations to mine. There's I Fired God, which I really want to read and review for the podcast. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But everybody tells me it's absolutely excellent. I know that Megan Phelps-Roper has a memoir as well. There are so many, and I thought to myself, what could I possibly say? That I'm Lydia Joy Launderville. If you don't follow her on Facebook, you should. She writes Facebook posts about modesty culture, purity culture, the IFB. Really wonderful writer. But I thought, like, what could I possibly write in a book that those people haven't written? What value could I bring that those people haven't already brought? Because there are so many memoirs of young women who grew up very much in the same situation that I did. And I realized that what I can do that other people haven't done, and what I think I'm uniquely prepared to do, is a medium that mixes the history of the IFB and mixes the why behind the rules and all of those things that I dug really deeply into when I was in deconstruction mode, and mixes that with my story. And I think that's what I can uniquely do. And once I figured that out, I thought, I'm going to start a podcast. And
really,
yada, yada, yada. Now we're here. Yeah.
So when was it that you were like, I want to start a podcast?
So people started recommending to me that I start a podcast several years ago. There was a phase after I moved to Portland where I was still just not completely recovered from the IFB.
I mean, you were physically away from the IFB, but your mental...
I was just very deep in the transition out, and I had a lot of mental health struggles going on because of the things that the IFB puts you through. I would tell all of these stories and try to explain all of these concepts, but it was in a very haphazard way. A friend would ask me some question about the way I grew up, because everybody knew I grew up a little weird. But a friend would ask me some innocuous question about, well, was it like this? And I would go off on like a 2-hour diatribe and try to explain to them who Jack Hyles is and who Jack Scott is and what that has to do with this thing. And it was all disorganized. Right,
because these are people who I had literally never heard of these people in my life. But to you, and if you're in this group, and if you're in these circles, then these people are I mean, these people are huge. It would be like saying that you'd never heard of Beyonce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And taking somebody from zero to having the framework of my life, who Jack Hyles is, who Jack Scott is, some of the basic tenets of the IFB and why they behave the way they do. So explaining biblical literalism, explaining their salvation doctrine, explaining what it's like to be in a church service there, explaining why the weird modesty rules, as well as telling the story of First Baptist Church of Hammond and how my family witnessed that story from different points of view, and everything between like 1983 and 2013 when Jack Scott went to jail. 2012, I think it was. So telling that whole 30-year chunk of story and giving the bare basics of IFB doctrine and rules, talking as fast as I can, and you know that's quickly, takes me about 2 hours.
It's like an episode of Gilmore Girls.
And like, you know, I realized that going off for 2 hours, honing that kind of stump speech, which is the world's worst stump speech because it's 2 hours long. But I realized that honing, as people would ask me questions and I would kind of go into that spiel, I realized that telling the story was cathartic for me and telling the story made me feel good. But I also realized that people were super interested in it. However, most people didn't have 2 hours to just sit and listen to me talk in person. And I realized every time I told the story, I was realizing things that I left out. I was realizing, oh, there's this foundational piece of doctrine. And if I could just explain that, then this other thing would make so much sense. And it appeared to me like a web. And I realized that all of these things depend on each other, like threads in a woven fabric or like a web. I realized that to tell the whole story, all of these things depend on each other. Modesty has to be explained before purity culture can be explained. But the IFB version of modesty depends on biblical literalism. So people need to have a general idea what biblical literalism is. And to understand biblical literalism, you have to go on a side trek over to the King James Bible preservation versus inspiration debate. To understand that fully, you got to know a little bit about the King James Bible, because if you don't understand the whole King James Bible thing, you're not going to understand biblical literalism very well. And biblical literalism is a little bit of a foundation to the IFB's modesty doctrine. And the IFB's modesty doctrine is heavily entangled with their idea of purity culture. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because it's like you have to know math before you can understand what physics are, and you have to know physics before you can understand how chemistry works. Like that.
And all of these things depend on each other. But I thought it would be really boring, and it wouldn't leave any room for my own story and my own hilarious mishaps, which happened to me because I'm me. It wouldn't leave any room for that if I tried to lay everything out in order. If I tried to start from the start and then go to the finish, it would just be episodes about really simple doctrines, and then it would get more and more and more and more complicated over time. And that seemed boring to me, and it also didn't leave any space for my own story. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am with realizing that it needed to be a podcast and not a book, and realizing the form that I wanted the podcast to take. So then I looked around for co-hosts. I knew one guy who was a comedian who probably would have been willing to do it, but just wasn't very interested in religious topics.
Huh.
And he would have been funny.
See, I didn't even know when we started out that you were like considering doing a podcast.
So I had been thinking about it for years, and people were just constantly like, Sadie, you should start a podcast.
I was one of those people.
Well, that's the story. So people were just kind of constantly on me about, you should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. I didn't want to do a solo podcast for multiple reasons. One being, I'm not that motivated, and I felt like I needed somebody to be the motivator and be the we got to get this done Because if it's just me by myself, I'm gonna release like one podcast episode a month, and that's not gonna ever do anything. I knew I needed somebody funny, and I had like, oh well, maybe this friend of mine could work, or maybe that friend of mine would be interested. But I never found anybody who would be a motivator and keep the ship on track and be funny, and who was legitimately interested in religious topics and could have a theological conversation. And then you told me that I needed to start a podcast.
Oh, wow. I feel chosen.
I mean, you are. No, don't get too big of a head about it.
I'm chosen not in the way that I'm Jewish. I'm one of God's chosen people, but like.
No, you're the chosen people and the chosen person.
No, well, here's how I remember it. Okay.
Oh yeah, I would love to hear your side of the story.
Is that so? I remember back in, I want to say like January, February of 2020.
It was January because my hair was still orange, not red.
Yeah, your hair was red, orange, and pink, and purple.
It was that sunsetty color. It was before I went the vampire red.
It was a very cool look. I gotta say, it was a top tier look.
Well, Rod Stewart thought so.
We haven't totally told that story yet. You know what? Do you want to tell the story on this episode?
I told it on my TikTok, but I can tell it on this episode too.
We'll tell that in a little bit. We're going to tell the story about the time that Rod Stewart tried to pick Sadie up before a Guns N' Roses concert. Anyway, it was like January of 2020. We were working at the same place, and you know, my job, I didn't even have my own like office that I worked in. I worked like literally at a desk in a hallway, which happened to be right next to the time clock where people punch in and punch out. Because I mean, this place where we worked, it was not like the best place. It was not the
OSHA capital of the.
It was not a well-run business.
No.
Let's put it that way. And I know people who still work there, and like from what I've heard, it's only gotten like 1,000 times worse since we had the good fortune of being laid off. So this was like January of and like we just talked about stuff from like. I knew that you were a music fan, and I knew that you like, because I had my Rush bag. Like I have like a what kind of bag is it? It's like
a messenger bag.
Yeah, it's like a messenger bag that says Rush on it, you know, the name of the band. And she was like, "Oh, that's a cool bag." I'm like, "Oh, you're a Rush fan." We were, you know, just like talking about music and stuff. I would just be sitting at my desk doing paperwork, and Sadie would come down, you know, when it was time to punch in or punch out, and she would sometimes just hang out with me on her lunch break, and we would talk about stuff. And
because the people in my office, some of the people that I worked with in that office are absolutely wonderful, and we're still really good friends. But there were some real toxic people in the office where I worked, and I just did not feel like spending an extra 30 minutes a day in there.
Yeah, people really said some mean things to you that you were telling me about. She'd come down. We just hang out. We just talk about stuff. And she would like, and she told me, "Oh, I was raised in the cult. And I'm like, really? Like, and you would tell me, I'm like, that is fascinating. That is absolutely wild. So after the pandemic started, because you'd come over to my house like once or twice, and we tried to work on music, and that's when we wrote the theme song for the podcast.
Right. We wrote the theme song like way before there was a podcast.
Yeah, like 3 months probably.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But then, you know, later coronavirus pandemic got us laid off from our job, which was nice because they gave us way more money to be laid off than they gave us when we were working there. Which was
at first, yeah.
Yeah, at first. And we live in the same neighborhood. And so I remember one time we were just like, I made some lemon meringue pie. Do you want some lemon meringue pie? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I went over to, we didn't go into your house. We were outside.
No,
like
because we were being like, because we were both real careful with COVID stuff before we got vaccinated.
Yeah, masking up and everything.
So we were like hanging out outside with masks on 6 feet apart.
Yeah. But you gave me the pie. It was delicious pie.
But I was baking a lot because it was, early COVID.
That's what people were doing. They're just like, I got a sourdough starter. Let's get it.
I did have a sourdough starter.
Yeah.
I had a sourdough. Sorry, this is a rabbit trail, but I promise it's worth it. I had a sourdough starter and it was doing really well. And it was like, I made a scratch sourdough starter with no yeast from water, flour, and apples. So I went above and beyond for the sourdough starter.
Well, you seem like, to me, you strike me as the kind of person where if you're going to do something, you're going to do the out of that thing.
Yeah, case in point, this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was very
Don't
into
half-ass anything.
No, I it's just a personal thing. I'm not very good at not jumping in headfirst to things that I'm doing.
That's not a bad trait, though. That's a good trait.
Yeah, I get a little overextended sometimes, but it's okay. No, so I had a sourdough starter and it was going really well. And then I got pregnant and I couldn't stand the smell of it, so I couldn't feed it, so it died. I really I had a sourdough starter. It was going great. I was making sourdough pizza dough all the time. It was awesome. And then that was a casualty. The sourdough starter died so that Chuck could live.
Well, I'd pick Chuck over a sourdough starter any day of the week.
I would too.
Chuck's way cuter than a sourdough starter.
I can make another sourdough starter. I can't make another Chuck. So it's fine, but that's what happened to my sourdough starter. I couldn't, because they have a pungent smell. And
Yeah.
I could not handle it.
So anyway, I went over to your house. We were hanging out in the backyard. I remember this was the time that you were telling me, you're like, in my upbringing, just us hanging out back here, because we were just in the same general area, 6 feet apart, wearing masks and everything. You're just like, this would be absolutely scandalous if I were hanging out with a man without a chaperone. And I'm like, tell me all about this. Yeah.
Yeah, we were literally outdoors in the same general vicinity as each other.
And so we were just, and I think that's when you told me, you're like, I started writing my book. And I'm like, that's awesome. Have you considered doing a podcast? And I don't know if you'd considered me as a co-host before. Then you're just like, you know what? I would actually consider. And so I just kept on you about it. I kept being like, we should do this because, we'd done music together. So we both had recording equipment and stuff. And my brother, my older brother is a basketball journalist, and he has done podcasts about basketball before. I was just like, hey, will you tell me how to do a podcast? How do I, because I had microphones, I had recording equipment and stuff. And I'm just like, how do I, if we're not going to be in the same place, how do I do that? He's like, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. This is how you distribute it. And I'm like, okay, boom, boom, boom. I can do this now. It's not that hard.
And then you were like, and you from there, I feel like you were kind of like, well, let's just record a couple episodes and see how it goes.
Yeah.
So you kind of talked me into it. You were like, okay, yeah, well, if you were going to do a first episode, what would it be about? Okay, well, if we were going to do 20 episodes. Oh, that's what it was. Because you told me, well, just make an episode list. Because one of my concerns was I don't know what direction I would go with the podcast. And I don't know if I should make a limited series or if I should make I don't know how many episodes I'm going to have. I don't know how much I can actually talk about this.
Turns out we can talk about a lot.
So, yeah, well, what you said was, and I think this was the decision that made the podcast happen. You said, well, why don't you make an episode list and see if you can get more than 20?
Yes. So
I started making an episode list, and I think I came up with about 100 on the first go.
And then, I as somebody not involved in this is I need to figure out something. If I know somebody who's a cult survivor, what do I want them to tell me about? What are the topics that I think are interesting? And I wrote down a bunch of it. So we have a doc that keeps getting longer and longer and longer, even though we keep crossing things off of it.
Yeah.
Of just stuff that we want to do in the future, stuff that we want to cover in the future.
And then we found out that that listeners are also interested in biographical episodes. Oh, can you talk about this guy? And Or can you talk about this ministry?
Yes.
Because
people love that.
Well, because what I thought that there would be somebody else, like being from a kind of a documentary perspective, doing profiles on well-known fundamentalists or profiles on well-known fundamentalist ministries. And Preacher Boys does personal stories, and often one of his guests' stories will focus on one particular guy or one particular ministry. But it's not a historical overview. It's a personal experience.
Yeah.
So that's something like completely different from what we're doing.
You know, and one of the things about Preacher Boys, I just want to say this, one of the things about Preacher Boys that I really like is that Eric does a good job of centering the stories of the survivors.
Such a good job.
That's the main, I guess I don't want to say, oh, this is the main purpose of his show, but like that's the main thing that like that I think that his show does a really good job of, and that I think is vital to having a good show. If you don't know what we're talking about, there's this guy, his name's Eric. He has a show called Preacher Boys Podcast. If you listen to our show, you probably have at least heard of it.
It's just every episode is an interview with a person who is a survivor of some type of abuse in a church, and they tell their personal story. He asks questions. I think that is just so important. When we started our podcast, I was worried about, are we going to be too similar in scope? And we're not at all, because what we do is it's a documentary look at the independent fundamental Baptist movement. But I think, I'm just so glad that he does the work that he does, because I wouldn't be able to hear that many stories of abuse all the time. A real tough guy, and I'm glad that he does it.
No, I wouldn't either.
I know you wouldn't. You have a tough time with some of our episodes.
Well, so, I mean, I just wasn't raised around any of these sorts of things. My upbringing was significantly less like traumatic than yours or other people's.
That's the thing. Like I think we balance each other out nicely, because I've just seen so much human suffering as a result of the IFB. I've just seen, it's not war or genocide or anything like that, but I've seen a lot of people who are very badly hurt, and I've seen a lot of people emotionally suffer. And I think I'm a little bit more numb to it at this point. And I think that's one thing I really value about having you around, because you still get shocked by that kind of thing. I
do. I really still do. Even though I've heard all of your stories.
Well, like the Josh Duggar episode was just shocking to you.
Yeah, it was horrible to me. I had a really difficult time with that. And the David Hiles ones.
You had a hard time for like a week.
Yeah.
And like,
it was rough.
I am sad when, I'm sad about the allegations against Josh Duggar. I'm disappointed. It breaks my heart that could, that has happened to people, and that he might be involved in further victimizing those people who have already been victimized. Like that's very sad to me, and it does break my heart, but it doesn't really get to me mentally, because this isn't new,
Yeah.
For me, this is just it's just another thing.
That's sort of one of the reasons why our show has been successful, is because if you're used to that, then you can just kind of blow through it. But I think for a lot of people, I know using sort of like marketing terms makes me feel a bit cynical, but like we do have crossover appeal. And I think that having that sort of like, you say something crazy, just having the crazy thing, it's like if you're writing a comedy show, you can't have every character be like, I'm trying to think of an example. What's a good comedy show? Seinfeld. If you're writing Seinfeld, you can't have every character be Kramer. You have to have somebody be Jerry and somebody be George. And so I'm like Jerry, and I don't want to say you're like Kramer, because
that's okay. I love Kramer.
I love Kramer too, but like, your stories are way out there.
Yeah, and you bring us back to like this is not normal. This is not normal reality.
And I think that's also valuable for our audience to hear, because a lot of them grew up with the same sort of thing, and just hearing, and a lot of them have religious trauma, or, trauma from abuse, trauma from from various things, and just hearing somebody say this thing that you went through is not normal. I like maybe a bit cathartic for them.
Yes, that is such a big deal. Like, that was a huge deal for me. And that was a huge reason why I started telling my story to begin with, because I need to hear other people say, this is not normal.
Yeah.
Like, this is not how things are supposed to be. That is very validating to me, and I think to other cult survivors as well, because we need to, because it's been reinforced in our minds all our whole lives that this is normal, this is the right thing, this is how things are supposed to be. And I think that hearing somebody else say, no, it's not, that is not normal, this shouldn't have happened to you, I think that's really validating, and that can really help somebody's healing.
So why don't we
Do you think we've shoegazed enough? Do you want to go on to something else?
Well, I think that was very like a valuable discussion for us to have, for us to talk about, because I think these are conversations that we've had before, sort of in part, but we've never really had them on the show and really said them for the listeners. I want to move on a little bit and ask about, like, so what are your favorite moments from the show, and what are your favorite episodes that we've done so far over the past year?
My favorite episode that's more recent is the Steven Anderson duo.
Those were really good.
I enjoy talking about him because he's a well-known crazy. So that's fun.
He provides a lot of entertainment. He really does.
He's entertaining. Yeah, he's very entertaining. We have a correction about Steven Anderson while I'm here.
What?
Somebody informed us, unfortunately, that Steven Anderson probably did not piss himself when he got tasered. And I'm really sorry to hear this, and I'm sorry to have to share it with you and the listeners. But the person who reached out to us, she said that it's not really that common. I was sad to hear it, and I am still going to walk around with the headcanon that he did.
I was going to say, in my headcanon, Steven Anderson peed sitting down in his car.
I'm still going to believe that he did, because that doesn't hurt anybody, and it makes me happy. But I did want to let you know, we had a listener who sent us a correction, and she said that she's very experienced in this, and that it's pretty uncommon for that to actually happen.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I don't like wishing harm upon people, but like, some people deserve it, so
getting tasered isn't really harm. You get recovered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be lethal. People can die from being tasered.
That's true, but he didn't.
Anyway, so Steven Anderson. Okay, if we were going to go back to like early episodes, so when we were talking about, so episode 1, episode 2, where we talked about the racism, and the episode 3 and 4, where we talked about like modesty, dating, Hyles Anderson College, and then after that we had like First Family of Fundamentalism.
I love the Jack Hyles episodes.
Yeah.
Just because I put like so much work into them.
You really did, though.
Those were so much work. I spent like 20 hours writing each one of those episodes.
Yeah, and those were early pandemic.
When I did not have a baby and did have a lot of time.
Yeah, and we were just literally like every day we were just like, and this is like when our show first started, and you were just like, okay, now I've written down okay, let's do this. And we were just like, let's go. And we just did it. Like, I don't want to say like all day, every day, but we just like go 5 days a week, just like hashing out episodes that we wanted to do. And that was super fun.
It laid a foundation for now.
Yeah, and that's how we figured out our process for how we, make episodes.
For like how we do things. And I love the Jack Hyles episodes because I mentioned on last week's episode that when we wrote the Bill Gothard ATI IBLP episodes, we somehow missed the fact that the IBLP/ATI suggests that people monitor their poop to see if it floats or not, to see if you have too much fat in your diet. I believe I mentioned that on the last week's episode. That was a TikTok from Backslidden Harlot, who I recommended on the Duggar on the ATA episode. That just blew my mind this week. Hi Heather, if you're listening. That's
a bizarre thing to have happen to like.
But like, I missed that when I wrote the ATI episode.
But that's like a whole thing that if you mentioned that, we would have to be like, okay, wait, somebody explain this to me. And then that would add another half hour onto that already very long episode.
Yeah, that's true. but so like I missed like little things there. I missed in the Steven Anderson episode, I missed allegations that Susanna Anderson keeps the cabinets in the refrigerator locked in her kitchen to not feed her children when they're hungry. Things like that can kind of, I can miss details like that when I'm writing even these huge biographical two-parter episodes. But for the Hiles episode, I am so close to the story. This story is like the fabric of my life. And I have so many sources. I probably had 20 sources for the Hiles episode. So the Hiles episode, I missed very little. I crafted it to get everything packed into those 3 hours that I possibly could. And I can't do that on every episode. I wish I could. I wish I had that kind of time to write every biographical episode that I write. I wish I could put together 20 sources for every episode that I write, but that's not really realistic given the time in the day that I have. But for the Hiles episode, I did, and I was really proud of my research.
And I think the Hiles episodes and the first Family of Fundamentalism series is where we found our voice.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's where it started to just kind of coalesce into like, oh, this is how the back and forth is going to go. This is how this podcast is meant to be.
This is how the process is. This is how, yeah. One of the episodes from around that time that I think is still one of my favorite episodes is episode 9, which so we came up with the first Family of Fundamentalism series, and then the one that came out right after that is called episode 9, How Sadie Got Out, in parentheses, the Side Hug from Hell. Because all of this documentary stuff and all of this like storytelling stuff is really interesting. But my favorite parts of the story, and I've said this before, the parts of the story that I find the most compelling are the ones where we talk about, okay, how do I go from being like, okay, I've decided to leave this group, but I have all of this trauma, to it's the puzzle the puzzle pieces between there and where we are now. And that one for me was like, okay, what was my emotional journey like when this thing happened? How did I have to how did I have to grow and change to do that? And that's one of the big ones for me, and that was one of my favorite episodes to record, where we really got to go into that.
I almost didn't want to do that episode.
Really?
Don't you remember like having to talk me into doing it?
You know what? Yes, now I do, because you know the story, the side hug and all of that stuff, it was very traumatic for you.
It was traumatic, and I also really want to be careful with protecting other people's identity. Now, obviously, if you went to Hyles Anderson College at the same time that I did, if you knew me back then you probably know most of the people that I give pseudonyms for my stories. You probably know who most of them are. You're probably able to put it all together and figure it all out. And that's fine. But this podcast is a very public forum, and there are thousands of people who don't know me in person who listen to it. And I don't want to put anybody on blast, because I feel like my story is my story. And those people, whether they've chosen to remain in the IFB or remain kind of fundy light, or really deconstruct and build their own lives, I feel like I don't own their story. So I always feel really sensitive about towing the line there of telling my own story without encroaching too much onto other people's stories.
That's completely legitimate. But that being said, because one of the things that I had to do, we switched to a different podcast distributor a couple months ago. And one of the things that I had to do was go back and, for various technical reasons, re-upload episodes to a different distributor. It wasn't like a necessary thing to do, but it was a thing that I wanted to do for cataloging purposes. And so part of that meant that I had to go back and listen to bits of the episode and decide where we wanted to insert breaks into the episodes. And so that meant going back and listening to a lot of our back catalog. There was a few of them that I was like, you know what? Maybe I didn't appreciate this one so much when it first came out, but now, like, I'm listening back to it, I'm like, wow, that was really good. And one of the episodes I remember being not so hot on when it first came out, or when I was editing it, and then I listened back to it, I was like, you know what? That one's really funny. and that one's really good, was the Valentine's Day banquet episode. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember you not being super excited about that one when it happened, and then later you did.
Yeah, and so that was one of the ones that I thought was really good. There were some really good moments of it. The other ones that I want to say just like are absolute bangers that I still like are the Paul Sand episode.
The
And
Paul Sand episode is classic.
and the one where episode 25, my personal finance teacher was running a Ponzi scheme.
That's one of our best episode titles.
Yes.
You know which one I really loved?
Yes, which one?
Making you watch Sheffy.
Yes. Okay, here's the thing
That
though,
was so much fun.
is that so, and I like that was one where it was almost like I was like, okay, now I guess I got to watch this long ass movie about whatever. But like I watched this movie and there's so many things that you explained to me about that, like, and I'm like, okay, wow. It's almost like I needed to watch this movie so that I could ask you the questions about it and understand what it was you were talking about, because so much of the stuff I had no idea about.
Yeah, and that's one of those movies that pretty much anyone who grew up IFB has seen probably a lot of times.
It's kind of like a bummer to me, because a lot of times, when we do homework episodes or when we do like reverse homework episodes, those episodes end up being a little bit less popular. People don't listen to them as much. But the Sheffy one, I feel a little bit disappointed that one is like a reverse homework episode, because that means that people, maybe they won't listen to it as much and they'll miss some stuff from it. But that one ended up laying a lot of really important groundwork.
Yeah, if y'all haven't heard the Sheffy reverse homework episode, by all means.
Yeah, maybe you don't necessarily need to go back and watch the movie Sheffy, because that movie is long as and really boring and not very good. I don't know. I feel like they could, or like how people do with podcasts, where they like watch it on, or they listen to it on like 1.5 speed or 1.25 speed. Maybe you do that with Sheffy, because that movie is 2 hours and 18 minutes long and nothing happens.
Speaking of 2 hours and 18 minutes long, would you like to go take up the offering and then come back and talk some more about stuff?
Yeah, so what we're going to do when we come back is we are going to talk about if we had a cult, and like make our own cult. That I think will be a little bit fun. And then at the end, I think we're going to get retrospective, and that's going to be really sweet.
And I'm also going to, I think this is a very appropriate time to finally tell my Rod Stewart story.
Okay.
So maybe we'll finish up on a light note with that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Hey, it's Sadie. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 1, where we start the whole story. You might also want to check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism. If you like the show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group, Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really do appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
So we are back. We are talking about it's been a year that we've been doing the show. Actually, we've been making the show for longer than a year. I think we recorded our first episode in like May or June of 2020.
I feel like it was the last week of May.
It was the last week of May, because the second episode was the week of like Breonna Taylor and all those protests going on, and the tensions were running super high in Portland, at least. And around the country. But but it's been a year since our first episode came out. So the first episode, I think, was August 11th, 2020. And this one is coming out on August 9th, 2021.
And we're just shooting the about our podcast.
Yeah, but the episode 1 of the podcast, what we did was we went back and looked at what is the BITE model. So that was behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. And those are the 4 aspects of what really makes something be a cult. It was it's from this guy called Stephen Hassan, freedomofmind.org.com.
What is it? It's in the bookmarks bar on my computer.
Yeah, it's very useful. But you know, it's sort of a thing where we're just like we did that. But no, now we were thinking, you know, this would be fun if we were gonna make our own cult. What would our cult be?
Yeah, because I think I both think it's fun. And I'm terrified of the idea that people might see me as a religious leader. I try not to be too preachy on the podcast, but I think some people enjoy my theological thoughts when they do come out. And I both think it's the best thing in the world and the most terrible thing in the world that anybody might think that I'm an authority on anything theological.
Well, I think that people identify with your experience and they look to you as somebody who is being outspoken about it in a way that they admire, so they're going to naturally gravitate towards you as a leader, not in the way of I want to do everything that this person says, but
Yeah.
this person's story I feel seen when they tell it. So that is a difference. So if we had a cult,
Well, yeah, if people were
yeah.
going to do everything I said, what?
Which see,
and you were gonna. So, do you want to be like my henchman in this cult?
here's the thing: is that for me, I feel I maybe you know this about me, maybe you do, maybe you've sort of gleaned this about me, is that I feel really uncomfortable in any situation where I have power over other people.
Yes, you're like egalitarian to the extreme.
Maybe to my own detriment. Would you say to my own detriment?
Yeah, probably. And I'm an oldest child and bossy, so I have no problem with being in charge of things. If my brothers are listening, they're laughing.
Yeah, no, there have been times in my past where I've been put in charge of something, and I don't want to say that I did a terrible job, but I don't like myself when I am given a lot of power over other people.
See, I'm very ambivalent towards having power over other people. It doesn't bother me, but it's certainly not something that I seek out. I don't seek out being in charge, except for the fact that I feel like if I'm in charge, things get done correctly. So I might as well be in charge. That's my view towards power. It's not that I don't get any enjoyment out of telling other people what to do, really, not since I grew out of being the big sister about 10 years ago.
Are you ever going to grow out of being the big sister? Let's be real.
No. Do you realize, like, if you could see my text to my brothers, you would understand. I will be on the phone with my brother while he's driving to work, and I will ask him if he's wearing a seatbelt. So no, I will never go out of being a big sister.
Does your brother wear his seatbelt?
Yes, he does. He always does. I just feel the need to mother him.
I mean, if he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, then that would be like, I would be like, good on you.
No, my brothers are like pretty responsible dudes, both of them. But I still am like, are you wearing your seatbelt? Are you drinking enough water? Did you take your vitamin C today? Like, I'm still very much trying to take care of them, even though they're both grown adult men and one of them's married.
Does Red Bull have vitamin C in it?
Yes, I think so. Right?
Okay, well, then I took my vitamin C today.
So anyway, I don't really enjoy being the person who gets to tell somebody else what to do. I'm very ambivalent towards that. But like I said, if I'm the person in charge, I can make sure that things get done correctly, because if they don't get done correctly the first time, I'm just going to end up going back and doing it myself the second time. So I might as well be in charge so I can just get it done right.
Also, if you ran the world, it would probably be a better place than it is. Like, that's the sort of thing.
If I ran the world, it would be color coded. There would be to-do lists on a chicken in every pot and a to-do list on every phone. I'm really big on to-do lists.
Oh man, me too.
I'm really big on lists in general. I list everything all the time, but mostly to-do lists. I love lists.
If we're gonna have a cult.
So if I was in charge and we were going to have a cult, what cult rules would we have? How would we run this thing?
See, here's the problem, is that I feel like if we were going to start a cult, it would end up not actually being a cult because we wouldn't be controlling enough.
Yeah.
That's the trap that we're going to fall into here.
Okay, yeah, but what if we had a commune? Do you think that would help us be more controlling and like more cult leader-ish?
What would our jobs be on the commune? That's the thing, is that I am adamant that I have a job that means that I get to, I don't want to say do as little work as possible, but like,
You don't like
if
the 9 to 5 grind.
you know what, I didn't mind the 9 to 5 grind when I had a job where my boss let me watch movies on my phone all day while I did paperwork.
Yeah.
But if it's like you need to do annoying bullshit all day and deal with people who are going to be mean to you, then I'll be like, no. I'm like Bartleby the Scrivener, and I prefer not to.
And see, at the same time as you had that job, I had gotten my promotion for that company, and I was working in the accounting department business office. So I was running my entire day. I was doing everything from cash deposits, credit card deposits, making accounting adjustments when people mess things up in the system, running paperwork from place to place, doing audits on the gas miles in the company car. Goodness, what else was I doing? Auditing customer perks. So did so-and-so give too many perks to this one customer, or did they follow procedure? As well as just like a ton of paperwork, inventory. I was doing so much stuff. And I was constantly running. Like I would get to work and not stop doing things until I was done with work. And I loved it. I like always having, like, I like work.
So, so basically, do you feel like you should be the person that's in charge of like the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, I want to be the organizational person. Like, I want to be the person who's responsible for approving the menus in the cult cafeteria and assigning housing and making sure that people do their jobs and making sure that the whole thing runs the way it's supposed to run. I want to do all the numbers and the organization and the color coding and the schedules and all that. That's what I love. And
then my job will be to make sure people feel like they're getting the satisfaction out of their cult experience.
Yes, you can. Okay. So you can be cult satisfaction coordinator.
Cult satisfaction coordinator. Make sure that that everybody's getting equal time in the
okay, so you know how cults, like, and you haven't seen The Handmaid's Tale, so you don't really know exactly what I'm referencing, but The Handmaid's Tale, the part where they're her fault. Okay, cults have like shame circles.
Yeah.
Where you have to get in like a circle around a person and shame them and tell them they're bad, and then it proves their loyalty to the cult.
Okay.
So we're going to have that, but it's going to be, what should we do? Like compliment circles or like self-affirmation circles? Or should we have one of each for people who like different things?
Yeah, so that's some culty
because, okay, you like compliments. When I try to like say affirming things to you, you're like, yeah, whatever. Tell me my outfit looks nice.
Yeah.
But I'm like, Gavi, you are the perfect person to be in the place where you are at this point in history. And it's all going to work according to the plan of the universe. And you're just like, can you just tell me that my hair looks nice or something?
Yeah.
You don't go for like spiritual affirmations.
That spiritual affirmation thing, I'm just like.
But that's what I want. Like, I want the spiritual affirmation. So maybe we should have a compliment circle for you and your kind, and a spiritual affirmation circle for me and my kind.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where, like, what I want to be told is, you are dressed amazingly well. Your clothes are tailored to fit you perfectly, and you look incredible. And my response to that is, I know. See, that's how I operate. Is that like
right. And like I don't really like. I don't mind if somebody tells me I look nice or whatever. But that's not really what I seek. Like, what I seek is like what is the emotional affirmation way more. Okay, well, speaking of clothing, should we talk about our cult's clothing rules?
Yes, what's our cult's clothing rules? Because I feel like the affirmation circle, getting in an affirmation circle and having like, the thing is that we give people the validation, but we like make them dependent on us for validation if we're having a cult. So that's the process there.
Right. It's like, so basically it's like overloading the system with compliments or validation to the point where like a regular compliment doesn't do anything for you anymore. Kind of like how when you try all the other sins, like sinning doesn't do anything for you anymore, so you have to be gay. It's like that. You've gotten like all of these.
I keep forgetting.
You've gotten all of these compliments, and now like if I'm just like, hey, Gavi, nice jacket, it doesn't do anything for you anymore because you need like the whole circle.
Yeah,
Okay.
I need to like be sitting on a throne and having
The
people
throne.
like
That's a great idea.
a compliment throne where like if you do well in the cult, then we give you time on the compliment throne.
Time on the
And
compliment throne. That's beautiful. I love it.
if you don't, then your time on the compliment throne is restricted.
Yes. Okay. 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 So speaking of what you're gonna wear so that you can get all these sweet sweet compliments.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of torn on this, and I want your opinion because part of my mind wants to make our clothing rules like you wear like a t-shirt and like flowy gaucho pants.
I'm not joining that
And
cult then.
okay, let me like hear me out. And you get different colors, and your outfit's all monochrome, but you get different colors depending on how many years you've been in the cult.
Also, like a Carol Baskin's Tiger Rescue.
Yes. I mean, Agape Boarding School technically does this. Their polo shirts show like what level of whatever you've achieved. So like that's what I want my cult outfit to be like in my heart. And it'll all be like jewel tones. It'll be very classy. When I look out at my group of followers, it'll be like all these beautiful like mustard and like peacock blue and emerald green. And it'll be a very nice color palette for me to look out upon.
Mm, I don't know. For me, like,
But
so
but I
here's
feel
my
like maybe
issue.
that's not the best way to go.
No one joins a cult for t-shirts like that. You
But
can't.
like it's like
If you
it's like
join a
silk
cult,
or
you
no,
can't.
it's bamboo. Bamboo's the best fabric. It's like that.
Uh, that's highly debatable.
That's not debatable. I'm the cult leader. You're only my minion.
Look, my job here is to make sure that our cult is like your job is like running the day-to-day functioning. My job is like I feel like it is like the cult satisfaction, and I feel like
Yeah.
aesthetics very much falls into that category. Because remember, this isn't just like because like when you look at like all these fundies, right? You could tell that they're a fundie just by looking at them, but that's not a good thing.
Right.
If we want our cult to be popular, if we want our cult to be like cool, then we got to make people look at us and they'll be like, oh, they're one of those, and that's a good thing. I want to join. You see what I'm saying? So here's, and this is something that I've been thinking about, is that First Baptist Church of Hammond, everybody was like, okay, Jack Scopp wants us to dress like a 1940s, like, I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's like a, I don't know.
He was like, everybody has
the Amish idea of a sex worker. That's what he had people dressed like.
So he's like
in the 80s.
So this is like the style that like he's like everybody's got to dress in the style that my wife looks good in. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
But like if you don't have a like but that body that is not going to be a good aesthetic for everybody's body or skin or like
right. Like I want people to look good and I want people to feel good.
So here's what you got to do if you want to do this, and this might be like a big upfront investment for us, is that you got to get like a tan France type person to come in and be like, okay, this is your aesthetic. You're going to dress like this, but there has to be like, and tell everybody these are the clothes that you are allowed to wear because these are the clothes that you personally look good in, but like do it in like an affirming sort of, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I will go for this plan if with a couple caveats. I will let you have your plan. But
okay.
Number one, I want to make a rule that no uncomfortable clothes for people who don't like uncomfortable clothes. Like our Tan France dude is going to have to find people clothes that fit that aesthetic but are comfortable on their body. So like accounting for people with sensory issues, accounting for like people whose bodies just kind of gain and lose a lot of weight, either for medical reasons or for whatever reason. People with uteruses who get bloated. All of those things are going to have to be accounted for because I know you don't mind like if your clothes are like stiff and uncomfortable, but I cannot stand it. Like the worst thing in the world to me is clothes that are too tight on my shoulders. Drives me insane. I cannot do anything if my clothes are too tight. Like I cannot live my life if my clothes are not comfortable.
So one of the things that I think we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to get some of our cult members enslaved as tailors.
Well, why enslaved?
Because we're a cult. That's what they do, right? They enslave you.
It's not enslavement. They live on our compound.
It's voluntary enslavement, I guess. It's like a house elf.
It's not enslavement. It's living in community. They live on our compound. We provide them with food. We provide them with clothes, and then they work a job for the good of the community.
Okay,
I've never thought about this before this episode. What are you talking about? Shut up.
This is okay. So somebody's job is going to have to
trigger somebody, and I'm really sorry if I do. I'm just trying to have fun.
Somebody's job in this cult is going to have to be tailor.
Yeah, well, that all we have to do is recruit. Here's the thing. Your job is going to be something you like doing. So all we have to do is recruit somebody who's a tailor and genuinely enjoys it. And then that person's happy, and then everybody else is happy.
Okay.
I don't see why this is bad.
Because there's jobs that no one wants to do, and that's the issue.
Well, everybody contributes to those jobs. I mean, there's jobs I don't want to do at my house. I'm not like the biggest fan of vacuuming, but like I do it because I need to keep my house in order.
Okay, but like, what's the point in being a cult leader if you have to do all the jobs that you don't want to do? I thought that was the whole point of this. I'm not going to have to do all
the jobs that I don't want to do. That's why I have cult followers.
Exactly, that's the sort of thing.
But the followers are going to do it. But like, they're not going to have to do it all the time. Like one person, it's not going to be one person's job to clean the bathrooms. It's going to be on a rotating schedule. That's why I'm in charge of scheduling.
Just as long as you and I are not on that rotating schedule. That's
you
the
and
point
I are not
here.
On the schedule. Neither is Jonathan or future Mrs. Gavi, whoever that is.
Yeah.
Because we're the elite.
Okay.
But Chuck will be on the schedule because he builds character.
Yeah, it's like Animal Farm.
But look, all we have to get is 365 cult members, and then people only have to clean the bathrooms one day a year, which is really not so bad. And the bathrooms will get cleaned every single day, so the job won't really be that hard because they'll always be pretty clean to start with. I mean, I have to clean bathrooms more than once every 365 days a year. I think this is a net positive for our cult followers.
This is genius.
Yes.
This is genius.
Thank you.
Okay, so...
Thank you for the affirmation. I can get with these clothing rules. I maybe would like to see a uniform for ceremonial purposes.
Okay.
For like my birthday.
Okay, fair. What's the uniform for your birthday?
I don't know, but I'm set on the jewel tones.
You could do a cool hat.
Well, I mean, I want the followers to have a uniform, and then I'll get like a dressed up like military general version of that uniform.
Oh, so you have
even
like
though we're not militant.
The medals like all across your chest and everything.
Yes, I do want medals.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Even though we're a non-militant cult, I do want medals. I would also like a security detail, but like no weapons, just like super good at martial arts and stuff.
What about like martial arts weapons? You know, like a nunchuck.
Yes, that's fine. No, yeah, that's fine. No like guns and knives and things though. We don't need that.
Well then,
we're peaceful people.
I don't know, man. I still want.
Am I getting too into this?
No, I think that you're getting too idealistic. If you have a security detail, it's easier to just like, you know how much ninjas cost?
Gabi, what is the point of having a cult if you're not going to get super idealistic about it?
It's going to be idealistic for about 5 minutes, and then you're going to be like, you know what? No, let's just hire some guy with a gun, and he can follow me around. Like that's what's going to end up. You're like,
I don't think anybody's going to make an attempt on my life as a cult leader. I'm so benevolent.
Like way too much money. That's the issue.
Okay. Well, we'll sort out the security detail thing later.
Okay. Ninjas cost way more money than just some guy. We can just get some guy who's like, yeah, I was in the Marines. Okay, you'll do. Like,
why do we need to hire security? We recruit people who are good at this stuff, and then they get to do that, and that's their job. And they enjoy it, and I don't get attacked by my hordes of loving followers.
Okay, whose job is it to carry like the thrones or the plinths on the thrones that we sit on?
I don't want to be carried around. I like walking.
Okay.
I do want Chuck to have a little tiny one though. But that'll only take like 2 people to carry. It's probably fine. Oh, that's so cute. I'm just thinking of Chuck.
The last thing that we need to come up with is a name for our cult.
Oh, right. We do need a name for our cult. What about Sadie-tarians?
Sadietarians. I don't know. It's. I feel like it's a big swing to have a cult named after yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but starting a cult is a pretty big thing.
Yeah, but see, if you look at like Scientology, they made it sound like innocuous, like something that you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or
So you're saying that sadiology is better?
I mean, it's better, but I still think that it's a bad like Jesus put his name in his religion, um, or
Yeah.
people after Jesus put Jesus' name in his religion, right?
Right.
So that's the thing. Is that so putting your own name in your religion, I feel like is a bit like presumptuous, you know.
Okay, what about Edenites then?
The Edenites, you know what, that sounds like something that people could actually follow.
Yes.
Oh, it's like, oh, what religion are you? Oh, I'm an Edenite. Like, oh, what's that? Oh, well, it's based on love and
It's based on
fulfillment
love and being aggressively nice to everybody. This is
Yeah.
perfect.
This is perfect. Okay, we have a cult. Shoot us a message if you want to join. We really need. If you know anyone rich who wants to donate a large tract of land to us,
Yeah. So we can get that commune going.
get that commune going.
I
It'll
could
be
run a
good.
commune. It'll be fine.
Okay. Well, I would be. My entire point of joining would be figuring out a way that I can basically sit on my ass and.
You know what? That's fine because we're all about
Yeah.
people doing whatever makes them happy, and if that's what makes you happy, then that's what I want for you.
Yeah, my job would be making sure.
Sorry, should I say that in cult leader voice? If that's what makes you happy, then that's what I want for you.
So my job at the cult would be basically making sure everybody has a good time.
Yeah, you're like party coordinator.
Party coordinator, yeah.
And then my job is making sure that things actually run.
Yeah. See, it's we got peanut butter and jelly.
This is great. If you want to apply for a position in our cult, let us know what you would love to do for a job, and we will find a spot for you. Also, give us thoughts about my cult leader name and uniforms.
Oh, my cult leader name is going to be, or my. I guess I'm not a cult leader. I could be the secretary of Suede.
Okay.
Or the secretary of I don't know what's
secretary of swag.
No, swag is that's a bit hype beast for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
This will be good. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's
so now that we've formed our own. Now that we've reached the incredible accomplishment of being millennials who have kept a podcast up and running for an entire year, and formed our own cult.
Yeah. So before we get into, I think that we have like a bit of like a retrospective at the end. But before we get into that, I want to read off some numbers for it's just like some facts that I think that people might be interested to know about our audience, about our show in general. Okay.
Okay.
Are you good with that? You know, this is a retrospective episode. So as of now, we have had 115,000 downloads on our show. Okay. 115,000 individual, and by that I mean like somebody played our episode. So 115,000 episode plays. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me get my calculator and I'll tell you how I feel about that. Hold on.
Why are you calculating a number of plays per episode
of
the show?
So each episode, I think our average time probably comes out. Do you think our average time is an hour and 30 minutes or an hour and 45?
I'd go an hour and 45, especially lately.
Okay, so that's 1.75 times 115. Nope. 1.75 times 115,000 hours. That's about 201,250 hours of people listening to us talk.
Wow, so that's like 250,000 hours of people listening to us talk.
That is ridiculously cool.
That is really cool. Isn't it?
That's great. Like that's we think about all of the time that you and I put into this show. And it's hundreds and hundreds of hours of research, writing, recording, lately a lot of hours of recording because we're working around our mostly silent third co-host Chuck.
And then I have to edit all the baby noises. Yeah.
just thinking about all the work that we put in and how many hours of entertainment people are getting out of this.
Yeah.
That's really cool to me.
Yeah, I mean that's really just something that you can't. It's almost unfathomable. Like literally thousands of people listen to this show.
Yeah.
Literally thousands of people. Would you like to know what our most popular episodes are? Would you like to know our top?
I haven't checked that in at least a month, so I would love to know what the update is.
So our 2 most popular episodes, do you want to know what they are?
Do you want me to guess?
Yeah, guess.
I think our 2 most popular episodes are one of the 2 Duggar episodes, one of the 2 original Duggar episodes from January 2021, and the Josh Duggar breaking news trial episode.
All of our top episodes, our number 1 most popular episode of all time is the Josh Duggar breaking news trial episode.
Mm-hmm.
The second most popular episode of all time is one that we did not that long ago, episode 42, Bill Gothard number 1.
Oh.
The third most popular is Bill Gothard number 2. The fourth most popular is Duggar's part 1, and the fifth most popular is Duggar's part 2.
Huh.
So
people really seem to like the Duggar content, which is cool.
I mean, we knew about that going in. I think it's funny though.
Yeah. I hope people stick around, like, beyond learning about the Duggar stories to learn about the cult groups that make the Duggars happen.
Yeah.
I'm happy for those to be popular and for people to just want, like, the Duggar info, but I really hope that the people who are serious Duggar snarkers will stick around to learn more about the theology behind, like, what makes the Duggars possible.
And that's sort of the thing that I like, because when you were explaining to me, this is why we have to do these episodes, I was just like, why do we have to do these episodes? Because I don't want to say, like, I felt like they were bad or they were, or like
I was it wasn't that you didn't want to do them. It was just like you just could not understand why it was important.
Yeah, I did not, like, I did not get why people were into this or why people thought this is funny. So aside from all of the Duggars and IBLP episodes, do you want to guess which episodes are our most popular ones?
I would think First Family, because we recommend those a lot.
So the most popular one is episode 1. And then after that, it is the 5-part First Family of Fundamentalism series, which kind of tracks.
That makes sense, because those are the ones we like recommend people to start with.
Yeah, so what I think people will do, I think this happened a lot, is that people were like looking for Duggar's episodes, podcast episodes about them. They found our show, and then they heard us say, "Oh, go back, listen to episode 1." They went back, they listened to episode 1, and then they listened to the first Family of Fundamentalism series.
Yeah, I'm always interested in how people work through, because I know some people want to start at episode 1 and go straight through.
So that's what I would do.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people have told me that. But when I listen to podcasts that are non-serialized, I often start at the most recent and work my way backward.
I feel like our show is semi-serialized, though. That's the thing.
Well, it's not. It's serialized, but it's not in a very obvious way, because I will set up something on. I'll set up something on an episode, and then because I know there's an episode planned 2 weeks later where that thing is going to come back up.
Yeah.
Like, I set up way back in the ACE episode, which was forever ago. I set up the thing about the Loch Ness Monster is a proof of young Earth creationism, and it's a dinosaur. Knowing that eventually we'd get to talking more about evolution, we'd get more into talking about dinosaurs. Like, knowing that those things were eventually coming down the pipe, I started setting up that knowledge months ago.
Well, it's also like, I don't know about this stuff. And so in order for us to talk about it, I have to know what it is. And so we can't so it makes more sense, at least if you're coming from my perspective and you don't have your perspective of this. Like, if you haven't lived through it, then maybe it is more important that you go back to the beginning and listen from the beginning. You know what I'm saying? Because that's how I'm learning about this stuff. And if I don't know about this stuff, a lot of our audience isn't going to know about it either.
So maybe that's what people do. Maybe people who were raised fundy and already have a general knowledge of these topics, maybe they kind of skip around and start with things that are especially interesting to them. And people who are coming from more your perspective and don't know about these things start from the beginning.
No, that makes perfect sense if that was what was going on.
Speaking of back episodes, is there a... I know that your reactions get so much love, which they totally deserve because your reactions are so good. Was there...
It's all just like you just go,
Yeah, but it's the tone behind them for me. It's the... Can you think what is like the craziest moment? Can you think of like a big, like revelatory, like a what the moment?
Okay,
That's come up for you. I know there were some in the Steven Anderson episode.
The thing is, the Steven Anderson episode I expected to be crazy. The ACE episode really caught me off guard. That for me, I think it was. It has to have been the ACE episode where you were just talking about all of the stuff that's in ACE education, where they're saying it wasn't just Loch Ness Monster's a dinosaur. It was also the whole what were the other things? Oh, it was the South African apartheid thing that they taught, where they taught you that South African apartheid was good and that it was still ongoing even after it had ended.
Yeah, and that the people wanted it that way.
Yeah, which not accurate. Just all sorts of things where I'm just like, this is so contrary to everything that I've been taught. That was one of them. Is there something that you said to me that you didn't expect to get the reaction that it did, and then it did?
So there was something in last week's episode.
Yes.
The whole thing about the firmament.
The firmament.
Like that was just like completely normal to me. And I was like, yeah, let me just explain this to you. And it blew your mind.
I was so confused by that. I was like, because some of the stuff that, and I don't want to insult anyone who but they say this stuff and I'm just like, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my whole goddamn life. Like the earth surrounded by water like an eggshell. That's
like a very normal belief. Like everybody who believes in young earth creationism and the global flood believes in that. That's like so normal to me.
That's just one of those things where if you think about that for literally 1 second,
well, the question is like, how else did Methuselah live to be 900 and whatever years old he was?
I don't know. People just lived to be a long time back then, and then got.
Well, how if not for the fact that the sun's more harmful rays were blocked by the firmament?
That's not what makes people age, though. That's not what makes people like.
Right. There's that part, but that reaction really caught me off guard because I would have thought that. I've kind of had the impression that people were aware of the details of the young earth creationism belief. And I start going off about the firmament and you're like, just completely cut off guard.
Yeah. So it's also sort of like, and I should expect this when we're going into science, because a lot of the ways that these fundies are explaining things to me are just like, it's like comic book science almost. You know what I'm saying? Where they're just like, oh, I've invented a ray that reverses the aging of your cells and makes you younger. And they're just like, yep, makes sense. Like, that's like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Where it's just like, we figured out the cause of human aging, and it's that there isn't a sphere of water just like floating in the fucking air, just like blocking. Like, what?
Well, the cause of human aging is sin, obviously.
I guess. I don't know.
But
I guess smoking makes you age. Is smoking a sin?
Smoking is a sin because it damages the body that God gave you. But also eating a crap ton of fried chicken is not a sin for the same reason.
Yeah, because God wanted you to eat all that fried chicken. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made it delicious.
I'm not saying if God didn't want us to smoke, he wouldn't have made tobacco. But I'm on the straight and narrow now.
Yeah. I like cigars.
I've not had a cigar in a very long time. But
I smoked a cigar like a while ago, and it had been a while since I smoked one, and I was just like, what the, like, the thing that it does to your head It's just like
Yeah. Well, it's
head
nicotine.
spinning.
But yeah, the firmament thing was a recent reaction of yours that I just thought was really funny.
I was just bewildered. I was utterly bewildered. Okay, so here's another question for you then. Are there any episodes that like you go back and you look at and you're just like, maybe not. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like the first like 4 episodes, the information is good. My presentation was not on point. Sorry, I'm talking to you. My presentation was not top tier. I was really nervous recording the first few episodes.
And that's why we had to record them twice.
Some of them we recorded twice, and like it's not that they're bad or that I'm ashamed of them. It's just like now in retrospect, I realize I could do so much better. But I've really like thought about, I should go back and re-record that. I should change. Hey, buddy, almost done. I've thought about like, I should go back and re-record that. I should change things. I should make it better. But I think the greater good is to leave them up because it shows how much we've improved and it shows how hard we've worked. And it maybe will encourage other people to tell their story because you don't have to be an expert when you start.
Yeah.
And so like for my own pride, I totally want to like go back and redo all of the like everything before First Family of Fundamentalism and just do the same episode but rewrite it and re-record it. But I think it's better in general to leave that up as a testament to how much better we've gotten, like how much better our flow is, how much better I've gotten at explaining things, and how much less nervous I am.
Yeah, you're very used to talking on the microphone now in front of people, and
I never had stage fright. Like I don't mind speaking in front of a large group of people, but the idea of having things recorded for all time and eternity is a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, it is just a little bit. I think there's one episode that really comes to mind as one that I was just like, I wish that had gone a little bit differently. Do you want to guess which one it is?
You know, nothing in particular is coming to mind.
So there's one episode that it's also the one, I'll give you a hint. It's the one that we've gotten the most complaints about.
Oh, the food episode.
Yes, the food episode.
Well, I have a perspective on that. You tell me what you think, but I think I have something to say about that.
So if you don't know about this is something that like one of our early episodes. I think it was like episode 5 or 6. Yeah,
I think it was 6.
Was one where we talked about Baptist food versus Jewish food. Is that so? When we started this show out, you know, I was listening to a lot of other people's podcasts, and I was like trying to figure out what was funny, what. And so part of it, I think I was trying to be funny and snarky and stuff. And a lot of the complaints that we would get about that episode in particular is that we're body shaming people, we're fat shaming people, stuff like that. Which I don't want to say, I don't know how you feel about this. Is that I don't want to say that like that's entirely unfair because I wasn't exactly as kind as I could have been in some of this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think that because we got some complaints about it, and I was like, I need to go back and listen to this and see what's actually in it. And I don't think the things that I was saying but were mean because they were body shaming. I think they were mean because they were just kind of mean. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think like the actual things that you said were that bad. I think the way that you said them was a little bit antagonistic or rough.
Yeah.
But here's my entire thought on that. And this is something that I've spoken about before on the Facebook group. That episode would have been fine if I had said what I was thinking as well. Because now if you say something that I disagree with, or if you say something that I don't think comes out of your mouth just right, I'll step up to you and say, oh, no, I don't agree with that. Or I have a different perspective.
But I didn't even know that you disagreed with it. Right.
Well, why do you think that was? Do you want to psychoanalyze me or do you want me to tell you?
Is it because you're not used to standing up to anybody who's a man and
Bingo.
You think, yeah.
Yeah. At the time, there were things that you said on that episode that I disagreed with, or I would have liked clarification on your thoughts on, or that like I would have offered a different perspective on. But
And if you said that, I probably would have said, you know what, you're probably right about that.
right. Because we balance each other, and that is the beauty of our friendship, and that's the beauty of the podcast that we have. But at the time, number one, I was like 6 or 7 weeks pregnant, and I was so sick. I was so sick. I recorded that episode with a trash can by my microphone because I thought I was going to be sick.
And I didn't know that. I didn't even know you were pregnant at this point.
You did not know it. Yeah, that was right before I told you. So I was not like in a physical state to be confrontational. I was
talking about ambrosia.
Yeah, I was that was a rough episode for me. Yeah, that was you causing problems. That's okay. You're great now. You're worth it. But I was so physically ill recording that episode, and I like just could not stand up for myself or my opinions the way that I would have liked to. But also I was afraid to stand up to you because, oh, you're a man. And that wasn't something like, now I've had all this practice. And now if you say something on the podcast that I'm not a fan of, I'll just tell you.
And it's not even because I'm like a particularly like mean. It's just conditioning.
Right. Like, it's not you, it's me. It's so like, I think that episode, everything you said would have been fine if I had offered a counter opinion.
Well, what was it that you really wanted to say?
I think that I think you came off a little bit like, oh, it's always a person's fault if they have diabetes or heart disease or something. I think that societally those things people can be set up to have those health problems. We know that Black people are more likely to have both of those diseases, and it's
just
not
genetic.
It's genetic. It's the types of food that people eat. And it does not necessarily mean that that person made dumb health decisions.
It's just what's available to them.
There's a genetic component. There are food deserts. There are all sorts of things that go into this. And I think that making bad personal choices and not taking care of your health is definitely a part of it. And that's something that we should all, kind of try not to do. But I think you ignored some of the elements of that are less in a person's control.
I don't think you're wrong about that.
So yeah, I think you looked at one cause of diabetes and heart disease and ignored some other causes of it. So it's not that you were wrong about one cause of it. It's just that you kind of overlooked some of the other causes. And I could have provided that commentary and that counterpoint.
I think I was looking for like an easy dunk,
Yeah. And that, and I think also there was like an element of a joke that didn't land, and literally everybody makes jokes that don't land. That's not the funniest comedians in the world do that. So I'm not going to blame you for that.
And I'm not even a comedian, so.
And then there's also like the element that people use food as a comfort mechanism when they have very little other comfort. And you were raised by people who are super meticulous about healthy food. So that's something I think you're just less familiar with. And I'm not going to, I don't see it as you being a jerk. I see it as you seeing one side of something and not seeing the other side.
I see it as me being just maybe a bit myopic.
Yes, that's exactly what I see. It's not you being mean. If I thought you were a mean, awful person, I wouldn't be doing I wouldn't have my entire podcast wrapped up in you and our friendship. I think you were short-sighted and you were looking at one side of a thing. And if I had been A, feeling well enough, and B, more confident in myself as a person, I could have added the other perspectives, and that episode wouldn't have made anybody mad.
Yeah. So I'm sorry we put that episode out there without the extra perspectives and maybe a better discussion.
Yeah, but that's but those are the factors that went into that happening, and that's why I don't get. I feel like I'm glad that we're saying something about it at this point, and I'm glad that we're able to go back and clarify that. But that's how I see it, and that's why I don't really beat myself up over that episode or worry. I don't blame you or blame myself or like have any negative feelings about it. It's just like, oh, that could have gone better.
And also, I mean, it was early in our show.
Yeah. So there were a lot of factors that went into that one not being the best episode that it could have been.
So one of the things that I also want to that brings me to, and I maybe want to get a bit retrospective here. I want to talk about like sort of what I've learned about not just doing a show over the past few years, but like how this applies to everything else in my life.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd like to add some stuff to this, but I legitimately feel like having a podcast and doing like part of the process, this has legitimately changed my personality.
I hope that's a good thing.
Yeah, in a good way. In that, one of the things that, because I also edit the show, and so that means that I have to go in and listen to the raw audio of our show. And so maybe a lot of people don't do this or haven't had the opportunity to do this. But if you go back and listen to a lot of yourself just in conversation or in, you know what I'm saying? You become aware of your own mannerisms. You become aware of things that you do that I'm like, oh, okay, that is something that I like, or that is something, oh, that's a mannerism that I have that maybe I don't like as much. Maybe that's kind of annoying. Maybe that's rude. Maybe that could be seen as this kind of like microaggression if I'm doing this or that or the other thing. It makes you like actually aware of what you're doing. And some people just have a knack for that, for knowing that without having to do that. But I have never really had that. And having to go back and listen to myself talk, just have a conversation with a friend, which is what a lot of our show has been. Having to go back and listen to myself have a conversation with a friend for like literally dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, maybe even hundreds of hours at this point.
It's got to be over 100 hours.
Yeah, it has. I mean, but that's legitimately changed the way that I interact with other people. Also, that happened during a time of extremely limited social interactions. You know, when we were, in the pandemic, things still aren't quite back to what they used to be. So the conversations that I would have with people were much, much, much more limited. And so you go into like almost this like cocoon phase,
Yes,
and then,
that's exactly what I was trying to come up with.
Yeah, it's like a bit of like a chrysalis or like a cocoon or something. And then you go in, basically withdraw from society, make massive changes to yourself, and then like come back out and be like, I'm different now.
That was really profound. And now I don't want to say my thing.
What was your
thing?
No, go for it.
I've just noticed my filler words and my repeated words that I use and worked on not using them.
I've noticed that you've worked on not using them as well, because I like to cut those words out of the episode when I can. And I've noticed that of late, I've had to do a lot less of that.
Yeah, I have become, I've always hated my voice.
Really?
For reasons that I'm not going to go into on the podcast at this time.
I'm sure it's something sexist with your upbringing.
And abusive and just bad stuff. I have always just hated, and I mean despised, my voice. The sound of myself talking on recording would make me physically ill. That is how badly I've hated my voice in the past.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like I don't even know how to describe like how badly I hated my voice. And having a more high-pitched and more feminine voice has also led to me being discriminated against in a lot of work-type situations.
Don't think you're as serious or,
Yeah. I was once giving someone, in a customer service job, I was giving someone mechanical information about a car over the phone, and this person said, you know what? Shut up. Can I just talk to a man? Like, that's the kind of discrimination that I've faced because of my voice.
That's unreasonable.
And just being generally not taken seriously because I sound young and because I sound very feminine. But I have taken this show as an opportunity to do some vocal training, and I'm really happy with the progress that I've made. And I'm even able to listen back to episodes. Chuck loves her voice too. I'm even able to listen back to episodes without feeling too badly about myself. And That's been a real confidence booster. But I've also, alongside working on some vocal training and working on my diction and that sort of thing, I've also worked on filler words and expanding my vocabulary and crafting my vocabulary to the situation that I'm in. And it's not nearly as profound as what you had to say, but I'm really proud of the work I've done.
I'm happy with the work that you've done too. I never thought about your voice being a bad voice to hear on the radio or hear on the podcast, but I definitely think that now you have a very, like, your tone is a very rich speaking tone now. At least I don't know if it used to. I would have to go back
Well,
and
thank
listen.
you.
I never noticed it not being, but now that, like, you're saying, you're talking about your voice, and I hear you talking, like, it's a good voice to listen to on radio, and I'm happy that that's changed for you, and I'm happy that you're happy about that.
Yeah, I have really worked on that, and I think it's probably half the work that I've done and half just confidence. But I'm really happy with it.
Yeah.
So that's been great for me personally.
Wow.
I also think I've really expanded my skills in how I explain things to people. I always worried that I would sound condescending or that I would sound patronizing when trying to explain to someone a concept that they had never heard of before. And I think that I've really expanded my skills in that area. Somebody complimented me lately and told me that I really had a gift for explaining things. And that makes me really happy.
Oh, that's sort of interesting, because that's something that I don't want to say I'd never worried about it before, but then I started listening back to myself and I was thinking, you know what, in this section, I do sound patronizing. In this section, I'm trying to explain something, but I do sound condescending. Oh, in this section, I'm listening to myself back and I'm telling a joke that really didn't land. I was trying to be snarky and funny, but it just came out mean. And, that's...
Being better communicators, both of us.
Yeah, and I really think that that's improved. So we have two things left in the show. I think the first thing that we should do, why don't we give our guests a bit of, or give our listeners a bit of a preview of what we have coming up for them in the future. Sure. Yeah. And then we can finish off by you telling your Rod Stewart story.
Okay.
What do we have coming up? What episodes do we have coming up? I know we've previewed a couple of them a little bit. This month we have been I guess you've already heard the dinosaurs episode. You guys have already heard the dinosaurs episode.
Yeah, they've already heard the dinosaurs. Of course, I'm sure everybody has figured out that that's just a prelude to a real episode about evolution, finally.
Yeah, so one of the things that we are planning on doing, and then we have coming up, is
in the next couple weeks sometime.
Yeah, is we're going to have a guest on who is actually like an expert on our Darwinian evolution.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to ask my questions and get some clarifications. We're also going to talk about the young Earth creationist point of view and what I was taught. I've been doing some personal research that I am really pretty excited about sharing with you. And we're going to do a few other back to school episodes as well about things that were taught in IFB schools and how that compares to reality.
It's really exciting though. It is really exciting. So we've got one coming up about evolution. We've got one where we're going to talk about like American history, founding fathers, and like Abraham Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got one coming up where we're going to talk about literature, what literature was acceptable, what literature wasn't, because, it's back to school season and we want to talk about like education, because we feel like that's one thing that's really important to us. I don't know about you, Sadie, but one of the, like, probably some, and like we were talking about earlier with the ACE stuff, probably some of the stuff that's the most shocking to me is just how it's like legal in this country for people to be so miseducated. Because, children, they are vulnerable. Not just like physically they're vulnerable to being taken advantage of, but they're vulnerable to being taken advantage of, mentally and with their education. So you can basically tell them stuff. They will just assume that it's true because they trust you because you're an adult or because you're their parent. I don't want to come out and be like, oh, well, your parents don't have your best interest at heart. but like there's some things that legitimately people are being taught that I'm just like, how is it legal for them to teach this to you and say that it's education and not have you, taught the real thing?
Yeah, or I have some opinions on that, and I think I'll save them for the episode. But the gist of my opinion is, I don't really, at this point, I don't have a problem with parents teaching their children creationism. I have a problem with you telling the children that this is the only valid point of view and you cannot consider or learn about anything else.
Yeah.
That's what I have an issue with. I got the sweetest comment in the Facebook group about our dinosaur episode. Can I read part of that to you?
Yeah.
So this person says, Sadie, thank you so much for your vulnerability. As someone who grew up learning about all the evolution stuff, I really couldn't picture what it was like to not believe in it like I believe the sun goes up in the morning. Definitely going to help me be a more helpful and empathetic person in the future.
Wow.
I thought that was really great. So I helped somebody understand my point of view, and I'm really happy that I decided to be a bit vulnerable with the evolution discussion on our show. So far, that's really bringing me joy.
I really think, though, that people connect with that level of vulnerability because it's really easy to go out there and be like, I'm an expert now. But it's way harder to go out there and say, I'm still learning. Please be kind to me.
Regardless of our 30-minute bit about being cult leaders, in reality, I don't want people to see me as this enlightened being who has completely deconstructed themselves from the cult and knows everything that there is to know, and I'm leading them on to complete deconstruction victory.
That would be really disingenuous. And also not as interesting.
Well, that's not who I am, and that's not realistic. That's not a realistic portrayal of me. And who I am, some things I have really worked my way through and feel like I have gotten to the place I want to be with them. And then other things, there are things I just have no clue. And things that I'm still very unformed on. And I don't want to be a leader leading us all on to perfect deconstruction. I want to be somebody who is a traveler with our audience on that road. I think the whole thing that I wanted to do with this show is to show the complex relationships between the twisted theology of the IFB and the weird practices of the IFB and the abusive people within the IFB.
Yeah, because anybody can point to just some weird why don't they let you wear pants?
And that's fun, right?
Yeah, I mean that's fun to be like, oh, they're such weirdos. They don't let the women wear pants. They don't think about that even deeper than that.
Yeah, and what I want to illustrate, this show, just to kind of wrap up, the whole reason I didn't want to do it in some kind of sequential order, the reason I didn't want to focus overly much on my biography and my story is because it's an intricate relationship between the things that they teach that are unusual or more extreme than average Christianity, and the weird practices like not letting women wear pants, which those weird beliefs generate, and the people who are abusive of others who use that particular theology and those particular practices to further themselves in their quest of abuse. All of those things are not in a vacuum. Those things are related to each other. And those things can't all happen without each other. So that's what I wanted to show. And I think we're doing a good job so far.
Yeah, and so far it seems like our audience really likes us. One of the things that I've kind of realized when it comes to this is that the best way to build success is to build success through community. Whatever it is that you're doing, you have to try to build success through community. You can't, nothing is really achieved alone. And I think that the fact that people really identify with the show that we're doing really speaks to the level at which I think we've been successful at that.
I was worried that all our audience was going to want was those kind of snarkable episodes.
Yeah.
Just things where we just talk about the funny things and make fun of them. And I was so happy to learn that the audience, that you want to learn about the theology behind it. And you want to learn about the history behind it. Because for me, deconstructing was taking apart those pieces and seeing how they're dependent on each other and coming to an understanding of how this all fits together and how this all happened and why it happened and the history of how this came to be. And I am so thrilled that the audience wants to hear and learn those things as well. And while we're talking about our audience, of course, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in the Facebook group. Thank you so much to all of our patrons who financially support our show. And thank you as well to people who support us through tweeting about us and posting about us on the internet and talking about us to other people. All of you made this show what it is. And I am so thankful.
That's really it though. But man, so before we wrap up though, this is something that we've kind of been, I don't want to say, have we been teasing it, but we've been talking about it for a while. Is that
it's come up on the show a few times.
Yeah, we've referenced it a couple of times, but Sadie is going to tell us the story of the time that she got hit on by Rod Stewart.
Yes. And this has like nothing to do with the podcast. I just thought that the audience deserved a little treat for getting through us all the way through a year.
It's a funny story.
So here's the Rod Stewart story.
Yeah, tell me the story.
I will tell you the story.
Because I remember you told me the story when we were still working.
I told you the story like 3 days after it happened.
Yeah.
So I was in Las Vegas in November of 2019 to see Guns N' Roses on the Not in This Lifetime Part 2 tour. And it was an amazing show. We were so lucky to get tickets. It was at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and we got to see Guns N' Roses in a 4,000 seat amphitheater.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were very close to the back because the tickets sold out in about 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we had to do the thing of like sit there and like both of us had Jonathan and I both had our phones out refreshing the page to get through to be able to buy tickets. So we were very close to the back because tickets sold out so quickly. But we were not that far from the stage. It was like being on the 100 level at a regular stadium concert.
Yeah, still that's still worth it.
Yeah.
You still want to do that.
Yes. So I was at Caesar's Palace, and it was maybe an hour or two before the doors opened for the show. We showed up super early because of course we did, because it's Guns N' Roses. And we were all so hype. It was me and Jonathan and a friend of his that were all going to see the show together. And we were playing some slot machines before the show. And I sat down at a slot machine next to this older gentleman. And I didn't really think much of it. I noticed that he was dressed in expensive looking materials and that he had white spiky hair and that he had some plastic surgery done. I told this story on TikTok, and somebody said, if it's good quality plastic surgery, how can you tell that he's had it? And I said, shiny skin. That's the giveaway.
I mean, that's it, though, because you could tell if you've had Botox, then it's just like, then it shines.
Yeah, there's a look, and if once you know, you know. So I sat next to this older guy, and he had a younger guy with him. And they both had on really expensive watches. It was clear that they were together, and it was clear that this was some kind of fancy man. And he was playing like $5 slots. So I sat down next to this guy, and he starts chatting with me. And he was so personable. He was very casual, just asking me about myself. What's your name? Where are you from?
British gentleman.
Yeah. And I didn't notice his accent much, partially because I hang out with British people in real life fairly often.
Right, because your in-laws.
My in-laws have a fairly thick British accent. So I've acclimated to hearing the accent, specifically a London accent, which is what my in-laws have. So I'm pretty acclimated to hearing it. And of course it's in a casino, so the lights and music and everything. But this guy, he just chatting with me. I mentioned something about being there with my husband, and he got that look, that disappointed look, like when you say husband.
Yeah. I know many. Yeah, that look has probably appeared on my face many a time.
Yeah, it probably has.
You hear that, then
I take it as a compliment. I
it
thought
does
it was
shift.
sweet.
Yeah.
But he was really nice. We talked for about 5 minutes. The super embarrassing detail in retrospect is that he was just asking me about my hobbies and what I do, and I mentioned that I write music, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've written a few songs myself."
But you had no idea who this guy was.
I had no idea, and also, to be completely honest, I was pretty toasted. I was about to see Guns N' Roses.
You're like vibing. You're
yeah. So it was a nice conversation, and there was definitely that vibe of like, this is a guy who likes the ladies, and he was forward, but not. I didn't think he was obnoxious at all. I thought he was very chill. For being a super old guy hitting on a 20-something-year-old woman, he was very chill. He was very polite. I said husband, and his like body language changed, but he was really. We had like a 5 or maybe 10-minute conversation. Played some slots together, and I busted on the machine. So I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna get up and go find Jonathan and his friend and regroup before the show. So I found Jonathan and his friend, and they wanted to go outside to get some fresh air before we went into the amphitheater at Caesars because it's pretty hot in there. And we thought, okay, well, we're going to go outside, chill for a minute, and then we're going to go in and see Guns N' Roses. We were walking out the front door of Caesars, and there was a large lit up sign on the sidewalk advertising a show for a few weeks down the road. And the sign had the face on it of the man who I had just been talking to in the casino, and it was Rod Stewart. So, of course, like, okay, so when I got back, when I found my husband inside the casino before we went outside to get some air, I told him, like a good wife would, oh, hey, this older guy was hitting on me in the casino at a slot machine, but it's cool. I mentioned I have a husband. He's super respectful. It's all good.
Yeah.
So it's why, of course, I had mentioned to him that like some guy was hitting on me. And we walk out the door, and I just stopped in a crowd full of people and pointed at the sign, and I start screaming, "That's the guy! That's the guy! That's the guy who was just." And my husband's not believing me. The people around me are looking at me like I'm crazy because I'm stopped in the middle of the flow of traffic outside
yelling
the door.
at a picture of Rod Stewart.
Yelling at a picture of Rod Stewart. We went back inside to see if he was still at the same machine, and he was gone.
He struck out, and he was like, "Screw this! I'm Las Vegas doesn't do it for me anymore." Man, Rod Stewart.
So that's the story of how I met Rod Stewart and bragged to him about the fact that I write music while having no idea who he was.
But like, how would you know who Rod Stewart was? You would like, I don't like, I guess, I don't know. If I saw Rod Stewart, I'd probably know who he was, but also like,
yeah. And I'm not great with faces as it is.
Yeah.
I had a concussion, which we will at some point get into on this show because it happened to Hiles Anderson. But I had a pretty serious concussion, and after that I have trouble recognizing faces in general. So celebrity faces sometimes throw me even when it's somebody that I know who it is, and somebody shows me a picture and says, "Do you know who this is?" Sometimes I'll need a minute or not be able to come up with the name, even if it's a celebrity that I know or have seen in a movie or seen in a TV show.
And to be fair, Rod Stewart's hair is more famous than his face is.
Yeah, but I had no clue. But now I just have the special memories of the time I almost became Rod Stewart's 25th baby mama.
You know, if you'd have hooked up with Rod Stewart, you think in the next morning he would have sang, "Wake up, Sadie, I think I got something to say to you."
You know, I guess I'll never know.
You'll never know.
I guess I'll never know, but that's my meeting a celebrity story.
Yeah.
which is just like, I feel like everybody has like a celebrity experience, and I think it's very on brand that that's mine.
Rod Stewart trying to pick you up outside a Guns N' Roses concert. Respect.
I mean, hold on, I'm picking up the baby. I really appreciated the whole interaction. He was very respectful, kept his hands to himself, smiled, looked me in the eye, was really nice, didn't roll his eyes at me when I bragged about the music that I write to an internationally famous recording artist.
I mean, do you think that do you think he knew that you had no idea who he was?
I think that's when he figured it out.
Yeah.
Like, I think he went into it assuming that I did know who he was, and then it slowly dawned on him that I didn't. Yes.
And there's a picture of his face outside.
And there's pictures of his face everywhere, because he was like one of the next few shows after Guns N' Roses at the amphitheater, I believe.
Rod Stewart, man.
Yep.
If you want my body and you think
my husband sang that to me like the rest of the night.
Funny man.
Yes. So, I don't know. I thought it was a nice experience. As the person that I am, I do get hit on in public here and there. I'm not like that 10 who it's constant, but it does happen. And I always appreciate it when somebody is being just shooting their shot, but being respectful. And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you, but I have a husband and we're monogamous, and they're cool. Like, that's always a positive experience.
Would it change your mind if you found out that Rod Stewart is worth $300 million?
I found that out shortly after the Rod Stewart incident.
I had to Google that. Rod Stewart net worth $300 million. And honestly, that doesn't surprise me.
I did find that out shortly thereafter. And then I was thinking, man, I could just like divorce Jonathan for like a year and then get that sweet Rod Stewart money, and then break up with him and go right back to Jonathan, and we could live happily ever after.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their price.
But, my husband wasn't the biggest fan of that idea, so I guess it all turned out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, Chucko?
You could have took half Rod Stewart's money.
I could have.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm at peace with this. I feel like everybody has a celebrity story, and mine is so anticlimactic. So that's pretty on brand for me. I mean, no offense to Rod Stewart lovers, but I would have rather met Axl Rose.
Man, you see a picture of like young Axl Rose. Young Axl Rose was a fucking stud, man. Like
I once had a lesbian tell me that young Axl Rose is a chapstick lesbian, and I now can never get that out of my mind.
What's a chapstick lesbian?
Lipstick lesbian, like high femme.
Yeah. Okay. What's chapstick lesbian?
It's like a step below that. It's like pretty and long hair and a little more feminine, but not like the makeup and the heels and all that.
Okay. Oh, okay. I get you. Okay.
Yeah.
And on that note, if you're hearing that now, there's a couple of jokes that I had to cut out of that because they were a bit blue.
Don't worry. Yeah. Podcast listeners, do not fear. I wear headphones for recording, so Chuck can't hear any of this.
Yeah. So, but on that note, I think it's time for us to cut this one, to end this one.
Yeah. So in this episode, deep spiritual learning moments. Also, we create our own cult, talk about Rod Stewart, and make some lesbian jokes.
Yeah.
That is an appropriate podcast-iversary episode for us.
We've got a lot of good stuff coming up. We've got all the school-themed ones. And then after that, this is one I'm excited for, is that in September, it's the high holidays, where if you don't know about that, it's basically the most important holidays for Jewish people. I'm going to take Sadie to the services at the synagogue. Hopefully they'll be in person. If they're not in person, we'll just do something else and put that off to next year. But I'm going to take her to in-person services at a synagogue for the high holidays, and then we're going to talk about that. So that's going to come later in September. And then we've got a bunch of stuff planned for October and the coming months. So stay tuned in.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the High Holidays episodes.
Yeah, you're gonna go for Rosh Hashanah. You're gonna be like, "Oh wow, this is beautiful," and then you're gonna go for Yom Kippur, and you're like, "This is a bummer."
I'm a little nervous, and it's slightly out of my comfort zone, and I think that's so awesome.
It's gonna be
Like,
fine.
I love
You'll
doing
do
stuff
great.
that's like slightly out of my comfort zone. I think that's a great thing to do for podcast purposes, because when you're leaving a cult, everything's kind of out of your comfort zone, and that's something I can talk to our audience about.
Yeah, well, hey, it's going to be super good. I'm really excited for that one. I'm excited to talk about these beautiful Jewish traditions. And yeah, so anyway, I definitely, we're going to actually wrap this one up now. So it is, if you want to follow the podcast on social media, it is Leaving Eden Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, Leaving Eden Pod on Twitter. If you want to send us an email, it is leavingedenpod@gmail.com. You can, if you want to buy our shirts. Oh yeah, Mountain Moo shirts. Oh yeah, pretty soon we're gonna have to do the Mountain Moo challenge, the Mountain Moo drink. Then yeah, if you want to buy, we have a t-shirt shop on a Teespring shop. If you want to buy merch from our show, maybe I'll add some more merch in that show later. That'll be good. Yeah, and Sadie, do you want to plug your social media?
Sure, you can follow me on Instagram at Sadie Carpenter Music. You can follow me on Twitter at Hell Yes Sadie. I've actually been tweeting lately. I'm very proud of myself. You can also follow me on TikTok at Sadie Carpenter 1. And just a reminder, if you send me a personal message on my personal social media, I'm not going to say you can't. It's fine. I don't check my message requests on there. So if there's something time sensitive that you want to say to me, Facebook group or the podcast email will get it to me faster. And thank you for sending us personal stories and personal comments. I really do love them. I just want people to know that if you send it to my personal social and I don't respond for a while, it's just because I didn't check my message requests. So don't think I hate you.
Yeah. When you send us stuff, we do include, we do take that into account when we're deciding what we want to do for our show. What are people talking to us about? What do people, we got to keep our finger on the pulse of what the people want.
So if you have episode requests, we don't guarantee that we're going to do them, but we do read every single one. And if a lot of people ask for something, we want to deliver. So,
or even if you suggest something that we think, oh, that's a good idea, we should do that, then we might do it. But if you want to follow me on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse, I am the same thing. That is at GAVRIELHACOHEN. And until next time, we hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.
But old rolling river of time healed me in too many days. No regrets, no confusion, there'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided